About 90 minutes ago, the resumption of the trial of Saddam Hussein. He's facing charges in the killing of 150 people in Dujjail in 1982. Saddam Hussein, as well as 7 co-defendants who are in court there. They were forcibly brought into court. It was expected earlier on that they would not be in court. And as proceedings started this morning, there was an angry exchange between Saddam Hussein and the trial judge. Let's take a look at that again.
They were beaten up. Are you ignorant? What is politics? What do you think we are? You are a defendant, and you have the full rights, and you're standing here. You are selective and you are breaking the law. Long live Iraq. Long live the people of Iraq. Sit down. That's enough. Shame on you, Raouf. Shame on you, Raouf. You know nothing. You're a military ruler. In the name of God, the most merciful. God is great. God is great. Shame on you. In the name of the Iraqi people, I open the 11th session.
Angry exchanges there between Saddam Hussein and some of the other co-defendants and the trial judge at the opening of the resumption of the trial earlier, about that taking place about 90 minutes ago. Saddam Hussein, of course, walked into the trial. He was forcibly brought to the trial, shouting, "Down with Bush and long live Iraq," right at the outset. He and his 7 co-defendants had threatened to boycott the proceedings, and defense attorneys at the Baghdad court, that's defense attorneys for those for Saddam Hussein and the other defendants, calling the court unfair, saying that the judge was breaking the law and that proceedings there were illegal. Now let's return to what is going on there. What we're watching now is on a 20-minute tape delay. This took place 20 minutes ago, but let's take another. Let's go back to Baghdad.
And 3 orchards also were taken from me, and this is my statement. It's time for prayer.
إفادة المشتكي الثاني أفاد بما يلي بعد تأليفه اليمين القانونية وتعريفه بهوية كون قاضي التحقيق في المحكمة الجنائية العراقية المختصة العليا بتاريخ 9/7/82 وأثناء وجودنا في دار
July 82, while we were at home, the security people in the jail, along with the party, came to the house and arrested my parents, and my jail, along with the party, came to the house and arrested my parents and my brothers. 6 of my brothers. We were taken to the jail police station, where we were kept for 4 days. Then we were transferred to the intelligence headquarters in Baghdad. Then we were taken to Abu Ghraib, and we were separated, men and women. Since then, I did not know anything about my father and brothers. We were isolated in Abu Ghraib and prison. Then we were taken to the Samawa desert, me and my mother and many people from the jail. We were taken to a detention camp called Leah in Samawa desert. This detention camp was isolated from the outside world. I was only 11 at that time, and I did not do anything. I did not commit a crime. while we were in the camp, my mother died as a result of suffering and torture. I was alone with a large number of women and children, and in April '86 I was released and did not know anything about my family, and I stayed alone. And following the fall of the regime in 2003, I discovered that my father and my 6 brothers have been executed on the 23rd of February '85. I include the death certificates of my father and my brothers. My complaint is against صدام, حسين, برزان, يونس السمرائي, and Ahmed السمرائي. And the people who live in Samarra. And also, my complaint is against anyone who's taken part in this crime. And I also seek compensation for all the damage and suffering I had to go through. The accusation against my family that they took part in the assassination attempt was false. None of my family members took part in the assassination attempt. Following statement. She said the following. On the 8th of July '82, my brother was arrested from our neighbor's house. He was 17 at the time. He was taken to the party headquarters in the jail. A month later, my other brother was arrested. He was a soldier from our house. They were taken to the intelligence headquarters, then to Abu Ghraib. I heard they were tortured, then they were executed. We never received their bodies. We did not know anything about them until after the fall of the regime. When I went to look at the documents, I learned that they were executed for taking part in the assassination attempt against Saddam Hussein. Therefore, I wish to forward a complaint against Saddam and Barzan and anyone who took part in that crime. And this is my statement. Statement by ثروة. And so said the following in his statement. In 1982, following the assassination attempt on Saddam, I was 9-year-old. I was with my family. A week later, an intelligence people arrived along with some party members, and they pointed.
You're watching the trial of Saddam Hussein and 7 co-defendants taking place in Baghdad right now. They're facing charges in the killing of 150 people in the Iraqi town of Dujjail in 1982. What we're listening to is a statement being read. This is one of 23 witness statements that will be read today in court. There will be live witnesses as well. 3 witnesses are slated to give evidence later, including a very senior presidential aide when Saddam Hussein was president, and a senior intelligence official in Saddam Hussein's regime. The reading of these statements will take place, will continue to take place this morning. The trial resumed about 2 hours ago with an outburst from Saddam Hussein. He argued with the trial judge again at the outset of the trial, and he shouted, "Long live Iraq and down with Bush." Mark Ellis, who's the Executive Director of the International Bar Association, is watching these proceedings with us. He's in our studio in London. Mark Ellis, from what you've seen so far of this trial, and especially from what we've seen this morning as well, does this make the case for those who've said that the trial should not have taken place in Baghdad, should not take place in Iraq, it should have taken place under international jurisdiction in a neutral country?
Well, that was always the major question here. Did Iraq have the capability, the capacity to undertake these types of trials? Because under the best of circumstances, undertaking trials that deal with genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, are exceedingly complicated. But to do so in an environment that we know as Iraq can be viewed as almost impossible. So it was a legitimate question to ask and a concern. Now, but it's also consistent with international law and consistent with the responsibility of Iraq to undertake these trials, to hold individuals accountable through their own proceedings. But of course, it all depends on whether there's the capability of doing it. And I think that there are obviously some very serious questions now as to whether Iraq has that capacity. We're not at the point of no return, but we have certainly seen some very serious issues raised that I think would question whether Iraq has the capacity to do these types of trials under the circumstances that exist in Iraq.
We do have the example, of course, of Slobodan Milosevic, the former leader of Yugoslavia, who is on trial right now in The Hague in Holland. Why were the authorities so reluctant to do the same, to follow that same route as far as Saddam Hussein is concerned?
Well, for two major reasons. One, it's very clear that the United States, as the major occupying force, had made the decision very early that it did not support an international tribunal to try Saddam Hussein, nor even an ad hoc type tribunal, that it wanted to have this trial done in Iraq by Iraqi jurists under Iraqi law. It's also, I think, accurate to say that the Iraqis also felt that it was important to have this trial inside Iraq. And again, very consistent with international law to have that done. But in order to meet the international standards, you have to be able to meet standards of fairness, impartiality, independence, and that is what's being questioned right now with these proceedings.
Well, from what we're looking at right now, after that initial outburst from Saddam Hussein and the other co-defendants, it would seem that the trial is settling down. We are hearing those witness statements being read. So would you give the first round today to the judge?
Well, I still, again, question the merit on forcing defendants back into the court, because, of course, we could see very quickly a return to the annex of or the positions of a defendant speaking out, disrupting the court proceedings, being belligerent towards witnesses, and then you're facing the exact situation that the court faced a week and a half ago. So we'll have to see whether this apparent move is successful. But I wanted to make clear that it is not. The fact that the defendant is no longer appearing in front of or watching the proceedings in person does not mean that the trial is not fair or that it's not meeting international standards. So again, we're going to have to wait and see what happens on this.
All right, Mark Ellis, Executive Director of the International Bar Association, talking to us there from our studios in London with his insights into the trial of Saddam Hussein and the other co-defendants there, who are facing charges in the killing of 150 people. Those killings taking place in the Iraqi town of Dujjail in 1982. No doubt we'll be talking to Mark Ellis a lot more as these proceedings go ahead here in Baghdad. We're going to return now to coverage of the trial in Baghdad.
We were taken to the prison. After a day we were transferred to Baghdad, where we were separated, men and women. We were there for a month, then we were taken to Abu Ghraib, where we stayed for 11 months. And since then we did not know anything about my brothers. I would like to say that my third brother was arrested 2 months later after 11 months in Abu Ghraib. We were taken to Samawa desert along with many people from the jail. We were accused of shooting, opening fire at Saddam Hussein's convoy.
حملة اعتقالات ومداهمات منذ تاريخ 8/7/1982 أي يوم محاولة الاغتيال حسب ما يذكر وبعد هذا التاريخ.
Following that date, the detention and arrests continued, and the digging of orchards and the uprooting of trees, destroying houses and looting continued. After our detention in Samawa, we were released on the 26th of April, 86. And since then, we've been trying to find out what happened to my 3 brothers, but to no avail. We have had no information until after the fall of the regime, where we discovered that they had been executed along with many people from the jail in 1985. Despite the fact that they did not take part in any attempt on Saddam Hussein's life, there are copies. There are copies of the death certificates of my brothers, and my complaint is against Saddam and Barzan al-Hassan, Yunus Samarrai, and everyone who took part in this, and I seek compensation for all the damage that was caused to me. The statement by a resident of the jail. I live in the jail. I'm a farmer in the town. On the 8th of July 82, while I was in the orchard in the jail, I heard that Saddam had been to the jail. While I was leaving to have a look at the convoy, I saw the convoy heading towards the party headquarters. I heard shooting. His bodyguards exchanged fire, and the shooting was sporadic. I fled to my orchard, then I went to my home. I was frightened. 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I went to my brother's house, and I stayed there for about a week. I learned that the security forces arrested many people in the jail. Therefore, I went to Kadmiya to avoid arrest. I was told that the arrests that took place in the jail were haphazard and sporadic, included women and children. In Kadmiya, I went to a market. I was arrested by the intelligence. I was taken to the intelligence headquarters in Mansour, where I stayed for a year, where I was tortured. I was accused of taking part in assassinating Saddam Hussein, despite the fact I did not shoot. all I did was I was present during the incident. Then I was taken to the security headquarters for about a year. Then I was taken to the Academia, where I stayed for 9 months. Then I was taken to the Revolutionary Court, where I was sentenced to death. Then I was taken to Abu Ghraib, where I stayed until 86, where the sentence was reduced to 20 years in prison.
You're watching proceedings there, the trial of Saddam Hussein and 7 co-defendants. They're facing charges in the killing of 150 people at Dujjail in 1982 in Iraq. Proceedings getting off to a rocky start this morning. There were angry exchanges between Saddam Hussein and some of the co-defendants and the trial judge. But right now what we're looking at, or well, rather what we're hearing, are witness statements being read. They are the first of 23 statements that will be read in court today. There will also be live witnesses later, 3 live witnesses slated for the witness box.